Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. As we know, today was the second day of UPSC Civil Services Mains Examination and GS paper 1 concluded in the morning session. So we know that GS paper 1 you have three subjects: history, geography and society. In this particular video, we will try to understand and deeply analyze the way how UPSC has framed geography questions. What is the way areas from where sources have come, to what extent is the this question have come, from which sources questions have come, what are the areas where we have to focus upon. Also, it is going to be important for students who are appearing for the mains examination or UPSC examination basically next year as such. So let us try to understand the question first of all. As you can see, this particular question is a very good question because it is linking your static with current affairs. In a static weather systems you have to study, cyclones you have to study there. Many times UPSC asks question about cyclone, but this question is unique in the sense because they are not directly asking about tropical cyclone. They are asking that what is Fujiwara effect as such. Now Fujiwara effect is very much in news in last year, somewhere between September to December. Fujiwara effect is related to a concept that was given by a Japanese meteorologist Fujiwara. So how you could have framed this particular answer, what could be a good way to write answer? So first of all, before writing answer, it is pertinent we understand what exactly is the demand of question. Now in this question overall, we can split this in three parts. First part is direct part. What is the Fujiwara effect? You have to explain that. That means in the introduction, you do not have to add anything else. You can simply start with explaining the Fujiwara effect itself. So when you talk about Fujiwara effect, it is referring to such kind of effect where we have two different cyclonic system. Fujiwara stated that sometime in tropical areas, you have two different cyclonic system, tropical cyclones, hurricanes, or even typhoons you can call them as, and both of them start to move toward the same area. That means both began to converge. So when both began to converge, when they come very close to each other, rather than rotating just around their own center, they also start to rotate around this common center as such. This is the common center of both cyclone. So they start rotating around this common center. So whenever this happens, that effect itself is called as Fujiwara effect. In simple way, convergence of the two different tropical cyclone. That is how we can write introduction of this particular question. Second part of question is very simple. This is what you can call as the main part of body. You can add it. Explain the impact on the movement and intensity of tropical cyclone. That means whenever Fujiwara effect occurs, what is the impact? Then in body, we have to divide our answer in two ways, or basically two parts. One is the impact part. First is impact on the movement, how impact on movement is seen. Second, how the intensity of cyclone is affected as well. So movement, as we have discussed here, rather than revolving or rotating around a common center, two cyclones also start to rotate around the common center as such. Also at the same time, depending upon how these cyclones are converging, what is the kind of wind shear that you see in the upper atmosphere, the way how the wind speed and direction is determined, that to some extent will determine the movement of the cyclone. Many times what we see in Fujiwara effect, cyclones then start moving in the same direction, and the effect that will be felt in the coastal areas would be much more enormous, much more stronger compared to normal cyclone. What is the impact on intensity? Again, both impacts it has. Either it can strengthen the cyclone if they merge together in some cases, or they can weaken the cyclone if they are pulling the wind away from each other's system. So both kind of intensity effect we will see, strengthening of cyclone as well as weakening of cyclone. A strengthening of a cyclone would mean that higher amount of rainfall would be recorded in the area where cyclone is making the landfall. And at the same time, as far as the movement is concerned, we also observe that cyclones track become very unpredictable in nature. If one cyclone is moving, then easily you can predict what path it will take. But if the Fujiwara effect is taking place, movement or this track, identifying the exact track of cyclone becomes extremely difficult as such. These were some of the points you would have added in this particular question. So the proper structure should be intro starting with the Fujiwara effect, definition, explanation, then body part explaining the impact on movement and intensity, and then what about conclusion? So conclusion, the best way to conclude this if you are able to relate it to the current affairs, right? So you can even mention the name of cyclone, which cyclones has taken place or has occurred in recent times, which has shown or exhibited Fujiwara effect as such. The cyclone that we have seen originating in the east part of the Asia, hurricanes that also develop in the Atlantic Ocean, in both of the cases in last year, September to December, we have seen this effect taking place. So that is a very good way of writing answer, because you are connecting both the current affairs along with the static knowledge that you have from geographical concept. The second question relates to tundra region. Now this is a question that is very important, because till now UPSC was ignoring the climatic regions of the world. You do not have any such direct questions, at least in the recent year. So tundra region again is very important. It has been continuously making news headlines because of the conflict as well as the confrontation countries are experiencing in the Arctic areas. Also Antarctic Treaty was recently signed in. So tundra regions are ecologically fragile but economically important. Now the key word here is examine this statement critically, right? So you do not have to just talk about this particular statement, you also have to critically examine. You have to give arguments both in favor as well as against this particular statement. So how do you start this answer? In intro part, you can draw a beautiful map basically. You can draw a world map, or if you cannot draw a world map, at least you can draw the globe as such. That is better. In the globe, then you draw the latitudes, right? Equator, Tropic of Cancer, Tropic of Capricorn, Arctic Circle, Antarctic Circle, all you can show. And then you write what areas are referred as tundra regions. So high latitude areas, kind of areas that is largely beyond Arctic Circle or beyond Antarctic Circle as such, referring to vegetation as such, right? Permanently covered under snow. That is also how we can describe it. These are tundra region. Now two things we have to write in the body part. In the body, first you have to write that how are they ecologically fragile, and second, how or why are they economically important. That means in body we can start with, better to write with economic importance, because then you can relate how it is ecologically fragile. So what is the economic importance of tundra region? Several importance. First of all, we know that in Arctic areas we have the possibility of large volume of resources that we can find here. Lot of trapped oil and gas reserves also, it is expected by geologists, that is present here. So that is how it is economically important. So large resource base is the first thing that we can say. Second, we can say also it is very important from the perspective of maritime trade, because it is through the tundra region these days there is a talk about, for example, polar Silk route we're talking about, or Arctic sea route, northern sea route we're talking about. So from maritime trade perspective also it is important as such. Third, Greenland you can bring here. It was in news because also of the Trump. Trump was claiming the entire Greenland as to be part of its own territory. So what kind of significance Greenland has? So we know that today we are largely talking about the reserves of rare earth. So rare earth reserves, apart from oil and gas reserves, resources, we also have rare earth reserves as such. So this is the way how we can show both from the trading perspective, from the maritime trade perspective, from shipping perspective, developing new route to reduce the distances between the countries, from the perspective of the rare earth minerals, from the perspective of the traditional fossil fuels such as oil, coal and natural gas and all, etc. The tundra regions become economically important or significant as such. But at the same time, it is ecologically fragile. Why it is ecologically fragile? Because the impact of climate change to large extent is being seen or observed in the tundra areas. So permafrost area, as we had told you, permafrost means the part of tundra that is permanently covered under ice sheets. So this region is witnessing temperature rise. Due to this temperature rise, due to global warming obviously, this many part of permafrost is expected to become thinner or completely disappear. Due to this, large volume of the gases that is trapped inside would be released. That means greenhouse gas emission to some extent is directly this basically can happen from the tundra region as such. At the same time, as the climate change is taking place, its adverse impact would be faced, adverse consequences would be faced by both both plants as well as organisms, animals that live here. So migration pattern of fishes might change. In many areas where fishing is a common occupation, there you might have some problem as such. So this is how we can understand the ecological fragility of this tundra areas, largely driven by global warming and climate change as such. Examine this statement critically. So then you have to write that how both of them are also related actually. Though economic importance of tundra region can obviously be overstated, but at the same time it is ecologically fragile, and that fragility further we will see increasing as more and more human interference and human activities take place in this particular area. So this is how you could have framed the arguments that you have built around which you can frame the answer related to this particular question. So related to world climate, the question was directly related to syllabus. Both are the question that we are saying till now, both are directly related to syllabus. Only thing they have done is they have linked it with the current affairs, current event development, and that's how actually you have to prepare. So all of these are 10-mark question, you have to write within 150 words. Third is discuss the role of aeolian process in desertification and land degradation. Again, a core geography question coming from geomorphology section as such. So the best way to start the question or answer actually is in introduction, you define what does aeolian process mean. So you can write here, what is aeolian process? Aeolian process refers to the erosion, deposition, and also the movement of the particles that is largely done by the wind movement, okay, wind motion as such. So seen in which area, also we can add, this is largely seen in arid or desert landscape. The erosion, deposition and movement of sediments that is caused by wind, largely seen in arid and desert area, is referred as aeolian processes. Once you have described this, then in the body part you have to discuss. What you have to discuss? Discuss how this process plays a role in desertification and land degradation. So it is simple. When the wind picks up the sand particles from the desert, and if the wind is strong, it can carry these sand particles for a long duration or for a longer distance, and then it would deposit the sand particles in the areas which might not be desert, which might not be arid, which might be fertile landscape. And this is exactly what we're seeing in the areas of Punjab, Haryana and even in the western Uttar Pradesh, where the wind is carrying sand particles from the Thar desert or western Rajasthan and depositing these regions in the fertile tract of this state as such. This is nothing but an example of desertification. So it is caused by the carrying of the sand particles by the wind as such, small particles by the wind as such. Second is land degradation, exact same thing. So in the absence of any kind of example, you do not have any kind of protective shelter, for example, a tree lines that is grown, forest line that is grown. So in that case, wind can go further beyond the areas and can cause land degradation by depositing sand. That means you have increase in the sand particle in the fertile soil, the crop fertility would reduce. Basically, the soil fertility would reduce. If soil fertility reduces, the crop this yield would reduce. That is nothing but an example of land degradation. It was also news because of the Aravali issue. You have large scale protest going on when the government declared, or Supreme Court also declared, that any part of the Aravali that is lower than 100 meter will be not considered as mountain. So that is when mining can take place, and the aeolian processes impact on desertification and degradation can be seen to a greater extent in the eastern part of India, that is beyond Rajasthan also. This is what we have described, and you can bring in these aspects to link also it with the current affairs as such. So deflation hollows, for example, is produced by the aeolian processes. Also, we can talk about the effect of sand dunes, additional fact we can write. So we know that sand dunes, there are large amount of sand. So when the wind moves, these sand dunes also move along with each other. Mobilization of sand dune we see that can also cause desertification in many areas. So that is how we can frame this answer. Then water resources are both an asset and a source. Now see, this is a kind of predictable topic. Almost every year, even in last year if you look, a question was framed around water resource, because water crisis is not just a theoretical concept anymore. Water crisis is actually being faced in many parts of the world, including many parts of India. And this problem is expected to worsen in the coming future due to the over extraction, over exploitation of water resources. So water resources are both an asset and a source of conflict in South Asia. Now they have given you clearly that you have to talk with reference to South Asia and not have to look at the global this resources as such. So best way is that, again, it is a geography question. You start with introduction, and in introduction itself you can draw a small map of South Asia representing all the countries, right? So we talk about South Asia, which countries do you have? So Pakistan, you can show Pakistan, then we have India, then you have Sri Lanka, then you have Myanmar, right? Here you have Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, all these countries we can show. And then we can, so this region here shown reflects South Asia, or is basically a small map of South Asia. Now, what we have to discuss, we have to examine this statement. And also UPSC has clearly given that you have to not just write the statement or explain the statement, you also have to add a relevant example. So water resources are both an asset. The best way, in the body part, once you have described what is South Asia region and what is the importance of water resources, you can write that how water resource is an asset. So when you're declaring anything an asset, you have to nothing but explain its significance. And significance you have to explain on various parameters in various fields. For example, you talk about the significance of water for life itself. Right? We cannot survive. The human life or any animal, for example, for that matter, cannot survive without water. So, for survival, we require water. Second, economic importance of water can be highlighted. It is the water that is flowing in the rivers. We are able to generate hydroelectricity that supplies power and electricity to large number of the houses. So that is one economic importance, right? Dam construction over water. Third, we can talk about is the irrigation demand. In India, especially the Great Plains of India or plains of Bangladesh, right? Plains of Pakistan, to a large extent, the farmers are dependent upon the river water. That is how they meet the irrigation demand for their crops, especially water intensive crops such as rice, wheat, sugarcane, etc. and all that. That is where also water plays a very important role as such. At the same time, the rapid industrialization and urbanization has resulted in huge consumption of water that to a large extent is also met by the rivers that originate in the Himalayan mountain system, for example. So that's how we can understand that water resources is nothing but a type of asset as such. We can also not only talk about river water, we can discuss about groundwater reservoirs as well that you find in the plain regions of this Asia, South Asia. So that is the asset part. The next part we'll discuss about that though water is an asset, but because of the limitations of these resources or because of the over exploitation of these resources, it has also recently emerged as a source of conflict. Now, how it has emerged as a source of conflict? So we have to give example. Remember, so in the first part when you're giving example, you can talk about, right, Indus River, Ganga River, Brahmaputra River, Tista River. All of these are example of water resources in South Asia. Now, why source of conflict? So give the recent example. The best example can be Indus Water Treaty. We know that after the Pahalgam attack, India has suspended Indus Water Treaty. So Indus Water Treaty can very well become a source of conflict. It actually has become a source of conflict because Pakistan says that this kind of step taken by India is against the Indus Water Treaty. We will not tolerate it. India says that not a single inch of drop of water will flow without our approval and all that, unless until Pakistan has stopped supporting terrorism and all that. So to some extent, Indus River itself has emerged as a source of conflict. Second is Brahmaputra River. Brahmaputra originates from China. China has decided that it will build a dam, and not any dam, but the largest dam in the world over Brahmaputra River, called as Medoc Conti Dam. Similarly, India has decided it will build Upper Siang Dam. And then it means the amount of water flowing through the Assam region of India will be impacted due to the Chinese dam. An amount of water flowing to Bangladesh would be impacted because of the Upper Siang Dam in India. That can very well result in a conflict between three countries, India, China as well as Bangladesh. Similarly, we can talk about Tista sharing dispute. India and Bangladesh has a long-standing dispute over the sharing of river Tista because a rice ball of Bangladesh is dependent upon the water that is provided by Tista River, supplied by Tista River. And then also Ganga River. Farakka barrage has been a long-standing source of conflict between India and Bangladesh. Similarly, between Nepal and India, we can see in the future conflict emerging because a lot of the tributaries of Ganga River originate in the Nepal Himalayas, whether it is Ghagra, right? You have the, for example, Kosi River, Kali River, and all that. So all of this can have implications for conflict. In present also you have conflict, in future also it can be triggered as such. This is how by giving proper example, you could have framed this particular question. So easier question relatively. Then a question that was expected on local winds, because UPSC has given the hint in the prelims also, they have asked few questions related to local winds. So compare the Lu, Chinook and Fohn winds with respect to their regions of prevalence, their nature and climate. Now see, this is the question where rather than answering it, how you structure your answer becomes more important in getting higher marks. So now see, you can be overwhelmed actually by looking at the question because three winds are there. Lu wind, Chinook wind, Fohn winds. And not only there are three winds, you also have discussed about various things. So regions of prevalence, where actually these winds are flowing. What kind of nature, characteristics of the winds, and what is the impact they have, right? That is what we have to discuss here. So straightforward question. So introduction part is simple. Introduction, collectively you discuss what are Lu wind, what are Chinook wind, what are Fohn wind. So we can say that Lu, Chinook, Fohn, all of these are a kind of dry wind, right? Kind of warm and hot wind that flows in different part of the world due to the local geographical conditions, right? Season also you can write there, okay, largely in the spring, winter, or sometime in the summer season. For example, Lu wind would you find. That is a brief introduction we can write. Again, it is geography question. So draw the regional map here, right? Where Lu wind flows. Simply we can draw the map of India. We can show the plains of India is where you see the Lu wind. Where does the Chinook wind flow? A small map of North America you can draw. You not have to draw a very exact map, but this is North America, right? This is the Rockies mountain, for example. So Chinook wind These are flowing on the Great Plains of North America, right, on leeward slope of Rockies. Where is foreign wind flowing? In the Alps mountain, European map, Western Europe map you can draw, show the Alps mountain. On the leeward slope of Alps mountain, the wind is flowing. This will take care of introduction part. Keep in mind, geography always think what is the relevant maps and diagrams I can draw to make my answer more outstanding, or that can stand out in the eyes of examiner. Then see, this is a comparative question, right? The keyword itself mentioned here is compare. So you do not have to just write about each of these individually. Better to present your answer in comparative form. Now, what is the best way of presenting answer in comparative form? Is that you can draw a table, right? You draw a table. 3 winds are there: Lu wind, Chinook wind, and then you have foreign wind, and then different characteristics, right? Different things you can write. So area, right? So for example, I can draw a table like this. This is Lu, this is Chinook, right? And this side we can write this is the foreign wind. You also have to ensure that you do not exceed the whirlwind. That's why it is the best way of presenting this answer. Then what do you talk about? Area. Where does Lu wind flow? In the map it is shown in the plains of India. Where does Chinook wind flow? Great Plains of North America. Where does foreign wind flow? In the Alps mountain, leeward slope of Alps mountain. Second, what do we have? That is the regions of prevalence, right? Second is nature. So you simply show here nature. What kind of wind are they? So Lu wind, very hot, you can say dry, and because it comes from the western part, carries a lot of sand particle, desert along with itself, sand particle from desert itself. So hot, dry, dusty nature. What kind of wind is Chinook? Warm wind, dry wind. What kind of wind is foreign? Same, warm wind, dry wind, right? Then what we have to talk about is the impact on climate. How do they impact climate? So Lu wind causes heat wave like effect, especially in the peak summer, because the wind blows in the month of April, May, even extending up to the first few weeks of June. So the climatic effect is it causes heat wave like condition, right? Effect it is causes aridity in the environment. It causes what you can call as the drying up of the water sources, the rivers that you have, lakes that you have, whales that you have, they start to dry up or water volume becomes significantly lower. Then the falling up of groundwater table because of high evaporation. Imagine what kind of wind are these? Hot and dry wind. So the evaporation rate increases, that causes shortage of water or decline of water, scarcity of water in certain areas. Chinook, what is the effect of Chinook? We have discussed many times in classes. Chinook wind is known for rapidly melting the snow that covers the entire plain of USA. So when the Chinook wind blow, we have rapid melting of snow. That's why it is also called a snow eater wind. It provides warming effect because it is flowing at the end of the winter. So temperature earlier is very low. Now when the warm wind start to flow, it produces warming effect among the people, right? It also causes what? So grasslands, for example, that you have, grasses began to regenerate, grazing can start again, right? Also the agriculture activity can resume here. And similar exact impact you see in the Europe due to the foreign wind. So Chinook and foreign are similar kind of wind. So effect to some extent, climatic impact to some extent are similar in nature. That's how you could have presented your argument in the comparative form by drawing a table and talking about each of these aspects of the answer. So when you're making like this, it is understandable that you have covered almost all aspects of the question, demand of the question. The next is analyze the role of satellite-based technology in achieving climate smart agriculture. This was a purely current affairs based question. In many times in the current affairs classes also, in the geography when we talked about, we have discussed both of these concepts, satellite based technology and the climate smart agriculture. So you have to analyze that how satellite based technology can achieve climate smart agriculture and also food security. Think, what is the question? You have to talk about the impact of satellite based technology on two aspects. How it will help in ensuring climate smart agriculture, how it will improve or enhance food security, where again specific to India. So analyze it. That means you have to give arguments that how it is going to achieve both of this. So introduction, you can start by defining what basically is the meaning of term satellite based technology. Whenever you have scientific, geographical, technical term that is given in the question, make sure that you can explain that first in the introduction part. So explain what is satellite based technology. So geographical information system, GIS based, the satellites that we're using, right? Remote sensing satellites that we're using, GIS based information we are trying to capture. And based on that, we are analyzing data and are building a data driven understanding of the climate, database driven understanding of the agriculture, what is the factors that influence the agriculture and all that. Once you are done with this, you explain that how it is going to enhance climate smart agriculture. So simple, it would give us better idea about the availability and scarcity of rainwater, right? A scarcity of fresh water that is needed for irrigation. Based on that, we can do our agricultural planning. So agriculture would not be disconnected from climate. Our agriculture planning would be exactly in line with the climate-based changes, weather-based changes and all that. You also would try to understand that how pest attack and all this thing is seen across the agricultural heartland of India. So we can do use of pesticides or preventive use of pesticides also we can do here, right? Third, we can also try to understand the weather system, moisture availability, rainfall availability, probability of rainfall, whether flood-like condition can prevail or drought-like conditions can prevail, prediction of monsoon and all that. So based on that, we can then do agricultural planning as such. So to better understand the availability of moisture, the overall distribution of rainfall, the probability of pest attack, right? And that is how we can ensure climate smart agriculture. Food security, both are linked together. If you're able to make sure that your agricultural planning is in line with the climate and climate-based changes, weather-based system, then you can ensure that the amount of food that you're growing, the crops that you're growing, it is not lesser. Yield you can ensure it is to a maximum limit, maximum level. And that is how you'll be able to ensure food security in India as well. So that's how we can use the satellite-based technology. Even in the public distribution system, you can talk about that how satellite-based system can be used to track that whether the public distribution system based rice, wheat that is being distributed, there is no corruption. It is not being diverted for some other purposes or in the market. It is being given to the beneficiary. That's also where the tracking system can be used here, right? GPS based system and all that can be used here for tracking the vehicles of PDS. These are some facts you could have added, and these were very much in the news. It was given in many of the articles published in the major newspapers. Then the center of global trade is gradually shifting from the Atlantic region to the Indo-Pacific region. Purely again a current affairs based question. Right, you have here linkage between the understanding of the map. That's where the geography is important here. Understanding of the world's map and also the development in the international area, international affairs overall. So center of global trade is gradually shifting from Atlantic region to Indo-Pacific region. Again, it is a geography question. So what you can do, start with the map again, right? Show the world map, and on the world map, you can show where is the Atlantic Ocean, where is the Indo-Pacific Ocean. You can also pinpoint some of the major countries of both of these regions. Like Indo-Pacific, you can show China, right? India, Japan, these countries, Singapore. In the Atlantic, you can show Western Europe and the USA, Canada, these countries as such. And then you have to examine. Examine here means again, mostly you have to talk that it is indeed going on. But in the concluding part, you can also part also you can discuss that how Atlantic still remains a very vital node as far as the global maritime trade is concerned. That's how you can make a balanced answer here. So center of global trade is gradually shifting. How will you examine? So you have to give regions, right? Give regions responsible for this change. Why from Atlantic to Indo-Pacific shift is taking place? So first we can say, what is the regions? Rise of the Asian economies, right? Especially we'll talk about countries such as Japan, South Korea, China and India. Huge significant meteoric economic rise or growth is being observed in these countries. Second, what we'll talk about? We'll talk about that consumer, right? You have a large consumer base in these Asian countries. The population size of China, India itself is basically a large chunk of the world's population. So you have consumer, that means demand is higher, energy product, large amount of oil and natural gas is flowing to both consumers such as China, India, Japan, etc. So consumer base. Third, not only the population, but also the purchasing power has been continuously growing. So consumers here are now willing to pay higher prices for majority of products that is available in the global market, commodities that is available in the global market. So increase in the purchasing power due to economic growth, due to GDP growth can also be additional factor here, right? Fourth, you can write about the entire maritime trade, how it was moving due to the presence of straits, vital nodes, shipping port, etc. also has played an important role here. So development of the maritime trade routes, you can take example of Silk Route belt, right? Or One Belt, One Road initiative taken by China. Strait of Malacca you can discuss here. Park Strait you can discuss here. So all these water bodies, waterways that are present also play an important role. Plus Gulf, Suez Canal you can discuss, right? How Suez Canal has helped in connecting the entire Atlantic to Indo-Pacific, Europe to Asia, Arabian region to Asia through the Persian Gulf, Strait of Hormuz you can bring it, very relevant in the current aspect. current affairs. So that is the reason why the shift is being seen from Atlantic region to Indo-Pacific region. However, we can also say in still the North America and Western Europe are one of the most developed region of world today. The purchasing power of these countries still is very high, and that's why there is a huge demand for multiple commodities and energy, right? Energy products, for example, and that's why Atlantic still has a significant role to play as far as global maritime trade is concerned. In the coming decades also, it would remain not very, this is not the major center maybe, but still an important center of global trade. That's how we could have concluded this particular answer. So that's how we can bring in all the aspect. We can see we have brought in mapping based aspect to explain our understanding of geography. We have brought in the current affairs based development that is taking place. We have also brought in the conclusion by properly giving arguments both in favor and against, right? So that is about this. Next question is analyze the major drivers of human induced land use changes in India and their geographical consequences. So best way of introducing this answer is by defining this term. What do you mean by the term land use changes? So land use changes are simple due to human induced factors. When a particular part of land or a particular area of land earlier was used for some other purposes, for example agriculture, and now is being used for some other purposes. Example can be industrial activities. Earlier, for example, it was forest, now it has been transformed into a mineral landscape, right? Mines. So these are the changes which can be referred as land use changes, largely due to human interference, anthropogenic activity as such. What you have to do here? Simply analyze. What do you have to analyze? What is the region? Drivers of human induced land use changes in India. And then second, you have to write what is going to be the geographical consequences of those changes. So drivers, what is the driver? Several drivers we can discuss about. First, we can say rapid urbanization, a strong driver of land use changes. Many agricultural area has been converted into urban land where townships projects are being seen, roadways, infrastructure and all this is being seen. So rapid urbanization. Second is rapid industrialization. You can give examples for each also, right? You can give data. That is where you can bring in data and evidences that you might have gathered during the preparation. So what is the rate of urbanization in India? In last 20-30 years, to what extent urban area has grown and rural area has shrunk, that you can write here. Rapid industrialization, industrial activities, data based on that you can write here. Then third is mineral exploration. Industries are based to large extent on the raw material which is of mineral in nature. So mineral exploration, you want to extract more and more coal, iron ore, bauxite, a lot of different minerals, this oil and natural gases and all that, right? Human induced land use changes. Then many agricultural fertile areas are also becoming infertile, degrading nature. Why? Example can be due to, for example, we talk about human induced, we have discussed about. So what is the reason behind degradation of the land? So desertification, human induced desertification. Why desertification? This you can directly link to deforestation. So due to deforestation impact, what is going on? Tree cover is being removed. As tree cover is being removed, what actually happens is the sand particles are easily able to fly across, or the soil particles which are bound to the plants, bound to the trees, now they're easily able to move around. So land degradation happens here, land use changes. Fifth, what we can say, the other land use changes, that is because of plantation agriculture. So we are cutting the forest and we are bringing plantation, rubber plantation, tea plantation, coffee plantation and all that. So all of these forest area are changing into a human based landscape, right? Plantation and all that. So these are some of the factors, drivers behind the changes, like shifting cultivation also you can write here. Apart from that, overgrazing by animals, right? That can also be one factor behind the land use changes and all that. Geographical consequences, what will happen? So agricultural land, their percentage would decrease. That means food security is going to be impacted, right? We'll see the changes in the economic activity from primary activity to the secondary activity, industrialization and all that we can discuss about, right? Deforestation would result in what? Loss of the rain, this reduction in the amount of rainfall, loss of the water bodies, right? Reduction in the volume of water in the water bodies and all that. So these are going to be geographical consequences. Water scarcity we might face, decline in the land fertility we might face, agriculture productivity will decline as such. So that is what we have discussed as far as this particular topic is concerned. In the conclusion part, what could you have written in conclusion part? We can write about the recent steps that government has taken to ensure that geographical adverse consequences of land use changes can be minimized, right? We are focusing upon that deforestation can be stopped and we can go further on the path of afforestation. National Forest Policy talks about 30% of area should be covered under forest, but only 24% is covered. So these are some points you could have written in simple form as far as the conclusion is concerned. Then next question, again it is 15-mark question. All the questions that are of 250 words, right? You have to write it within. Critically examine the challenges of demographic transition in contemporary India as such. So when you talk about critically examine, this is the important keyword. Right? Not have to just examine, critically examine. What it means? It means here that you should give weightage more against. Right? So arguments in favor. Arguments in favor, we'll talk about that how demographic transition can pose a challenge to contemporary India, right now we are talking about. But 62% of your content should talk about against that how demographic transition, rather than being a challenge, is going to present an opportunity for the India as such. So arguments in favor, arguments against. Now how we can start this question and answer? So introduction, right? Introduction you can start by defining the term demography or demographic transition. Right? Definition of demographic transition we can write here. What is demographic transition? It simply refers to the shift in the birth and death rate. Right? Demographic transition theory directly you have to study in the geography class 12, right? So Thompson and Nordstein, what they have stated? Initially, majority of countries are having high birth rate and high death rate, and then gradually as they develop, socio-economic development occurs, they transition into the status of high birth rate and low death rate, and gradually what happens? Both birth rate and death rate decline as such. So low birth rate, low death rate. So overall the transition from high birth death rate, low birth rate and death rate, this is what we call as demographic transition. If you want to make your answer stand out, you can also draw the diagram that was part of demographic transition model, where you have different stages of growth as such, right? That is also how you can represent. That could be a good introduction. Then examine the challenges of demographic transition. You have to write the challenges from perspective of India, not only world, not the world. So how challenges? What kind of challenges? We can write here. How demographic transition can present a challenge to us. So first challenges due to demographic transition, you have sudden increase in population, right? So population explosion happens actually, right? So population explosion, population increase. When population increases, at the same time, what happens? You are expected to provide, especially for youth population, job or employment opportunities to the people, right? Job employment opportunities. If you're not able to provide job and employment opportunities, the demographic dividend is a term that we use, can very well turn out to be demographic curse. Imagine large number of youth population of particular countries, especially India, is unemployed. So their anger, their frustration, right, their energy would be used in destructive activities. They would be they would be willing to do or participate in the illegal criminal activities, right? So that's why job employment opportunities have to be created. That is a challenge. Government has to create such huge this number of job and all that. Then third is when the high birth rate, high death rate collapses to low birth rate, low death rate. The other challenge you can talk here by taking example of southern states. Southern states are facing unique problem compared to northern state. In northern state, total fertility rate is still higher, but in southern state, it has fallen below the replacement level. You can introduce this concept here. The replacement rate of population, that is about 2.1. So when the replacement total fertility rate falls below 2.1, in the future, there will be shortage of workforce. There is more number of old age people, aging population, less number of working population. So they are going to face this problem, because if the percentage of the high age population, right, the retired population is higher, that means dependency would be higher. So a lot of resources would be spent in taking care of the old people through the pension, through providing them basic facilities and all that. And at the same time, number of the workforce is less, right? Workforce is lesser in number. If workforce is less, the contribution in economic growth, GDP growth would be relatively lesser, state GDP that we were talking about. So these are some problems that we are going to face in India in the coming days. And that's why the governments of Andhra Pradesh, the state governments of Tamil Nadu, they are now providing incentive to people to have more number of children. So this is how we can explain or reflect the challenges of demographic transition in the southern. Northern state, you can most focus upon this. Still TFR is higher, population is higher, but the other challenge is providing them with adequate and high quality job and employment. We have to ensure that, especially you can link here also with the rise of artificial intelligence. There's a big risk that it would result in the job losses. So if a mass job losses is seen, mass layoff is seen, that could further trigger a crisis. However, we also have to critically examine it. So we have to write that how this demographic transition can provide a very good opportunity for India to tap into its human resources and grow at a much more rapid pace as such. So here, what is the opportunity you have? Still, India has one of the highest population of youth category, working age population we can say. More than 50 to 60% of India's population still is in the working age group. If you are able to provide them adequate job employment, they can contribute significantly to the economic growth. At the same time, because of the higher workforce, higher percentage of workforce, the saving rate in the economy, investment rate in the economy would be quite higher. And that can be again used, the fund can be used, diverted to further cause more investment in the economy, right? In the industrialization, the rate or the pace of industrialization, we can increase and all that. So that's how also it presents an opportunity for us where we can tap into the human resources and can finally reap. The term that you can use is the demographic dividend as such. So that's how we can put both of our arguments, why demographic transition can be a challenge and how it can for now be used as an opportunity by India, people of India. And then you can conclude this statement by taking example of the real world. For example, challenges being faced by countries such as Japan, South Korea, Italy. Same problems you can see in the southern states. You can equate them, right? In the African countries, we have high TFR. So this is the situation that we have in the northern part of India as such. So that is how you could have framed this particular question. So these were some of the questions that was asked in the UPSC GS1 paper, mains geography. Total 9 questions were there. And as we can see overall, if you look at all these 9 questions, you can see that questions are not very unpredictable in nature. Majority of questions are linked directly to the syllabus, and in syllabus also specifically to the topics mentioned in the NCERT's class 11th and 12th. The only thing that you have to do is you have to link these topics with the current affairs, and if you have been thorough with the last 1 year of current affairs, I think you would have enough pointer to frame your answer. You will not have any shortages or deficiency of content here. Only thing you have to do in the examination hall is that you have to frame your answer in such a way that it stands out. Your answer should reflect to the examiner that you have met the demand of the question, that you have addressed each and every aspect of the question that was asked. Like in some question you have 3-4 parts, each 3-4 part, the proper structure, proper heading, subheading, maps, diagrams, right? These you have the opportunity to also make flowcharts. Like in demographic transition itself, you can make flowchart, how one thing relates to other and all that. So presentation is something which you could have definitely worked upon. And again, it depends upon how many answers you have written, how many test series you have attempted and written before the examination. If you have done enough, I think you could get very good mark this year in the UPSC geography paper. So that's all about geography discussion, GS1 paper. Thank you very much.